The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, Chicago hits the digital jackpot. The federal government and private investors make a huge bet on cutting-edge research. Why the next big thing may be invented right here.
Headline stories from centuries past comb through publications dating back to 1576 in this unique museum just north of Chicago, where everything is for sale.
Plus, it's a growing trend, ride-sharing companies picking up passengers for a price. But the taxicab industry wants Chicago to crack down, and a prominent alderman accuses the new card services of routinely breaking the law. All of these stories and more on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight we take a closer look at the battle over ride sharing.
It's the trendy new way to get a ride in Chicago. All you need is a credit card and a smartphone.
But the taxicab industry wants to put the brakes on rideshare companies, saying they're unregulated, unsafe, and unfairly driving away with potential customers.
Rideshare companies insist that they provide healthy competition for the cab companies and give consumers a service they are willing to pay for.
It's honestly one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Kurt is referring to his job as a driver for one of Chicago's new rideshare companies. The top three are Sidecar, Lyft, and UberX.
When I cruise around the city, I meet people, I have good conversations. I can start and stop at my leisure, so it's a lot of fun. And, I make pretty decent money doing it, too.
Kurt figures he makes on average $25 to $30 an hour working evenings and weekends, shuttling people around town in his own car. Kurt begins his shift by logging into the system, which alerts the company that he is available to pick up passengers. Using an app on a smartphone, rideshare customers place an order for a ride and the nearest driver picks them up. Over the past year, Kurt estimates he's handled about 1,600 rides.
I enjoy sharing my car and meeting new people, and I think I give a better service than you'll find with a lot of taxis.
Those are fighting words for Chicago cab drivers. They are suing the city for allowing the rideshare companies to flourish in Chicago without any guidelines. The highly regulated taxicab industry says Sidecar, Lyft, and UberX are operating as livery services without any regulation. A Chicago City Council committee tackled the controversy this week.
This is like paying someone to pick you up while you're hitchhiking, and we've all been told not to hitchhike.
Attorney Mara Georges, representing the taxicab industry, argues the background checks on ride-share drivers are spotty. But Uber says it has improved its screening process after the Chicago Tribune found the company did not fully investigate the criminal records of some drivers. But rideshare companies don't pay the same city fees and taxes that cab owners do. The taxicab companies say they generate about $24 million in annual revenue for the city. Crystal Abernathy, president of the King Drive Cab Company, says the rideshare firms enjoy an unfair advantage. Her drivers must go through weeks of training. They are fingerprinted by police. The taxis must pass inspections twice a year, and insurance on each cab can cost more than $5,000 a year.
It's hard to compete against businesses like the ride-sharing companies UberX, Lyft, and Sidecar, who do not have to pay these costs.
Alderman Ed Burke, who favors tougher regulation of the rideshare companies, blames the city's Corporation Council for not enforcing an ordinance that requires taxi licenses for anyone selling rides in the city.
In my opinion, it appears that these companies are indeed violating
the
law that we voted on. So why are we sitting here voting on laws that nobody enforces?
The ride-sharing companies say they do pay insurance and conduct background checks. They argue the service provides needed competition.
If you are protecting taxi companies, then you're not going to get comfortable with the idea of ride sharing, because this is something that ultimately hurts their monopoly.
Meanwhile, JW, who drives part-time for all three ride-sharing companies, says passengers are choosing Sidecar, Lyft, or UberX for a reason.
They want friendlier service. They want a different kind of service that the taxi cab industry just isn't providing them.
Today we are joined by Steven Schlickman, Executive Director for the University of Illinois at Chicago Urban Transportation Center, and welcome.
Thank you.
Do the taxi companies have a point in that the car-sharing services apparently are playing by an entirely different set of rules, that is, almost no rules?
Right, but it comes out of what ride sharing used to be, which is, you know, sharing a ride with someone who's going in the same direction as you, going to the same destination. And then these companies were formed to help facilitate that ride. And it wasn't necessarily a for-profit venture by the drivers of those cars or the people sharing the rides together, but it's becoming that. And when you step across the line of running a for-profit business, I think, yes, they have a good case.
Well, it really shouldn't be called ride sharing anymore. I mean, this is ride charge. They're charging you for a ride. You're not sharing a ride.
Well, I think there are drivers out there that are probably trying to make money, but I think there's also drivers out there just trying to defray the cost of a trip. For instance, there's the Tick and Go operation in California that started up. That's what they were trying to do. They were just trying to facilitate people going to the same destination. Uber, Lyft, Sidecar are really in a for-profit situation now, and I think they do need to be regulated.
Well, you've got the taxi cabs. The drivers have to get chauffeur licenses. They have to, as we saw, they have to get fingerprinted by the police, vehicles inspected twice a year, and the ride-sharing companies don't. On the face of it, does that seem unfair?
I think so. I do. And I think some of the operators will admit, I'm not sure all of them will, that they need to be concerned about consumer protection, about safe vehicles and safe drivers.
For the taxi companies, there is a medallion, a license, which are bought and sold on the private market, and the city has an auction. The last auction, the price for these taxi cab medallions was north of $360,000.
Right.
That's a big investment that the rideshare companies don't make.
Well, I think these new startups are going to change the industry. And I think we're going to have to rethink the business approach to not just ride-sharing services, but taxi services as well. I think you're going to see them starting to blend together. In fact, taxi cab drivers that I've talked to belong to Uber, and they use the Uber service to get trips.
In fact, I've seen ads where Uber and the car services are recruiting taxi drivers.
Right.
And the companies, the ride-sharing companies, say that they are challenging what is a monopoly on the part of a handful of cab companies.
Well, it's a regulated monopoly. So you do have the local government trying to ensure that there's competitive fares or low-cost fares for the user. But I think we need to let the marketplace now take over.
Well, speaking of the marketplace, one of the attributes of these ride-sharing companies is something called surge pricing.
Right.
So that if it's rush hour or there's a snowstorm or if you're out of the United Center after a Blackhawks game, the price can go up, and it can go up quite a bit. WLS-TV had a case of a woman who was charged $277 to go from River North to O'Hare. Is that fair marketplace, or is that price gouging?
It is price gouging, I would say, but you know, in a situation where you can't get a ride, and the best way to do it right now is to get on your app and hit a button. I mean, it does give you the option of turning down the ride if you don't want to pay the fare.
Do consumers know exactly what that fare is going to be before they get in the car?
They should. From what I understand, they should get an indication of what the fare should be before they get in the car. But you know, if a driver finds someone in a desperate situation and takes advantage of it, well, they've got the leverage.
The ride sharing, in a way, is sort of limited to people who have credit cards, smartphones, maybe computers. And there's an argument that it's elitist, that it doesn't serve a big section of Chicago and isn't required to.
I agree. It's serving a niche market. It's serving people who, you know, have moved downtown, who don't want to own a car. They want to reserve their disposable income for fun. And that has to be looked into by the municipalities. particularly the city of Chicago or other big cities who regulate these services.
The other thing is background checks. The Tribune asked one of these companies for background checks on all its drivers. It handed over a few. One of those turned out to be a convicted burglar. Does the city have to have tougher rules so that when people get in these cars, they know that the driver has passed some kind of a background
and I
check?
think the mayor has put forward a proposal that does that. It gets to those issues of protecting the consumer. He does not want to touch regulating the price, which I think is a good thing. Let's, again, bring marketplace forces to bear, merge the taxi companies into a similar approach, and see what happens.
The other issue that's been brought up by the taxi cabs is that they are required to serve the disabled. They have to have so many vehicles that can pick up people in wheelchairs and people with other handicaps, and the rideshare companies don't have any of that obligation right now.
Yeah, that's getting in a tough area because people are using their personal cars and they're not adapted to serving the disabled. And I think that has to be looked into too. Serving the disabled is something I know about from my transit days, is a very expensive proposition. And we do have the Americans with Disability Act that tries to keep total access for the disabled to wherever they need to go. So I think it has to be addressed. I'm not sure how you would do it with personal automobiles.
So can these two systems coexist? Can we have both the traditional taxi cabs and the new
I think
rideshare?
it's going to happen. I mean, we're moving that direction. These smartphones are taking over our lives. The efficiency that's provided by a smartphone to the consumer, they want it, and we're going to have to provide the services to them.
And the taxi cabs are going to have to
They're just going to
adapt?
they're going to have to adapt, but on a level playing field. So I think we need to look at some deregulation on the taxi service side as well.
All right, on that note, we have to wrap up. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.